This week I made an industrial bench from a live edge slab with distressed steel legs. This is a remote design collaboration I did with Mike from Industrial Maker. We challenged each other to take a similar concept for a bench and see what each of us comes up with. Make sure you check out Mike's video when you're done with this one. This slab is from a western red cedar tree milled up right here in Oklahoma by my friend Vaden, and it's set in my shop for about 10 months drying until I figured out exactly what to make with it. To start, I had to flatten the slab using a router sled, and before I could do that I had to shim up the slab and make sure it was level. A router sled consists of 2 rails and a center carriage, and they're fairly simple to make. I use these fence clamps to hold the rail secure to the work table. To level the slab, I'm using this 1.5" bottom cleaning bit that removes a lot of material quickly, and there's a link to the one I used down in the description. And then you just run the router back and forth over the workpiece, working all the way to the opposite end. I start with the bottom of the slab first, and when you're done with that, flip the slab over and repeat on the opposite face. You're left with 2 flat parallel sides, and in this case, a whole lot of pink sawdust. Next, I removed all the bark from the live edge, and thankfully removing bark from cedar is fairly easy. I used the chisel to get most of it before finishing with my orbital sander. To mark the position of the legs, I used a speed square and drew a line 7 inches in from the ends. I used this scrap metal and the speed square to measure for the legs so that they will clear the edges of the slab. My slab was 16¼ inches wide, and I added 2 more inches to account for the width of the 1x2 inch rectangular tube steel I'm using for the legs. Using my cold cutting metal saw, I cut the top pieces to length and added 45-degree miters to the ends. Altogether, there are 8 pieces that make up the 2 leg frames. 4 of these are the vertical pieces that all measure 17 inches tall, and the other 4 horizontals match the width of your slab plus the thickness of the steel. I prepped the metal for welding by grinding the scale off the ends with a flap disc. These welding magnets are super handy and help get the pieces to 90 degrees, although they aren't perfect, so I use a square to check it. And as with all my welding projects, I like to build up a jig using MDF. This makes keeping your pieces at 90 degrees almost foolproof and allows for repeatable welds. To weld up the steel bases, I'm using my MIG welder running argon gas. I start by tacking up one side before running full beads on the other. Metal will pull towards the weld, and this helps keep everything square. After running all the beads, I grind down the welds with the flat disc to give a cleaner, more finished look. The legs will frame the slab, so I cut down pieces to fit around the bottom of the slab. Now these 2 spacer blocks are cut to slightly taller than the thickness of the slab. The blocks get loosely clamped in place, and then I welded everything up again, tacking on one side before running full beads on the other. I also cut and welded in this vertical centerpiece that's more of a design feature than it is structural. I used a clamp as a stop block for the angle pieces that attach to the verticals I just welded, and I cut a 45-degree miter on each end. Then it was over to the sander to help true up the miters and clean up the edges before welding them to the base and the vertical support. With all the welding complete, I marked pilot holes for the attachment bolts 4 inches from the ends. I drilled them out and then used a step bit to match the 3/4 inch bolts that I'm using for this. The bolts and washers that I use for this project are zinc coated, and I use muriatic acid to remove this coating. While the bolts were stripping, I mocked up the legs onto the slab and drilled the pilot holes into the slab to accept the bolts. The legs each get a few coats of blue spray paint, and I've had really good luck with this Montana spray paint I've used in the past. And then I used this Presto steel blackener to patina the bolts and the washers after the zinc was removed. To distress the legs the way I wanted them, I used a combination of this old chisel, then some 120 grit sandpaper on a sanding block, and finally I used some steel wool. And then I could finish the legs with 2 coats of a spray-on varnish. The slab had several knot holes and voids in the top that needed to be filled, and I used this 2-part East Coast epoxy you've seen me use before in my Parsons table build. And also like the Parsons table, once the epoxy is cured, I find the easiest way to remove the excess is to heat it up and then chisel away as much as possible before finishing with an orbital sander. Then I could sand the entire slab, and you can see all the pink and purple tones that's hiding just below the surface of the wood. With the pilot holes I drilled earlier, I used a 3/4 inch Forstner bit to drill out the bolt holes into the slab itself. And for the finish, I used General Finish's water-based top coat. After 3 to 4 coats, the grain really pops and it leaves a natural, clean-looking finish. I assembled the bench by sliding the slab through the legs and then attaching the legs with the bolts through the top. And if you look closely, you can see the washer that I had to use on one side as a spacer to get a really tight fit. And once that was done, the bench was finished. Hey everyone, I appreciate you checking out this video. If you haven't already, make sure you head over to Mike's channel, Industrial Maker, and check out the bench that he made. There's a link down below. And I like that we had similar concepts, but completely different execution. I think that's what makes design and sharing ideas so much fun. Now, I've had this cedar slab sitting in my shop since last December, and the whole time I was just trying to figure out what to do with it. So I came up with this industrial style cedar slab live edge bench with the welded steel legs. And I love the way this bench turned out. What do you think about my color choice for the legs, the blue that I went with? Would you have chosen a different color? Let me know down in the comments below. If you dig it, I always appreciate that thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button and the bell button to stay up to date with all my future builds. And for more of the day-to-day stuff, follow me on Instagram at Jonny Builds. And I just want to say a big thank you to everyone that's subscribed already. I hit a huge milestone today, 50,000 subscribers, and I'm so grateful for all of you in this community. So truly, thank you. There's exciting stuff coming to Jonny Builds. I've got merch coming, I've got t-shirts, I've got stickers, and very soon I'm gonna be launching a Patreon page where you can get access to sneak peeks, to a live chat, and credit in these videos. So stay tuned for that. As always, thanks for checking this one out, and we'll see you back here next time.